Welcome to For the Church, a podcast for the flock of Zion Presbyterian Church in Columbia, Tennessee. We want to help you think biblically about everyday matters. Zion exists to join Jesus in his mission to reach people with the gospel and then to equip his people to worship and serve. I am Seth Scruggs, and joining me is my conversation partner and co-host, Keaton Paul. In our current moment of Zion's history, we're on the journey to find a new lead pastor. And with that comes a lot of questions. And this season, we have tried to answer as many of those questions as we can. We've talked about what it means to be a pastor. We've talked about the denominational process. We've looked at several profiles of what it means to be a pastor in certain capacities, such as theologian, the everyday pastor, taking care of souls, those kinds of things. And so we find ourselves at the end of the season, and we just kind of want to put a button on it. And so Keaton is here with me.
Hello.
Usually you do the intro.
I know, yeah.
But we decided to switch it up.
Yeah,
How are you doing?
Yeah,
Start there.
I'm doing great. To give the Seth answer. It's a Thursday afternoon. I got a haircut today, and I get my haircut kind of downtown Columbia. So, and Destiny and Addie were with me, and naturally, if we're downtown, she was like, it'd be great if we could go get some coffee. So
That's the Megan response.
I know.
As well.
Yeah.
My wife. Anytime. Yeah, hey, and basically to get anywhere from our house, you have to drive
right.
relatively close to downtown.
Right.
And so it's like, well, if you're gonna go there, you might as well go to Muletown.
I know.
Get me some coffee.
Yeah, that's kind of what it was. Hey, we'll do you a favor, and we'll go with you to get your hair cut.
So that we get things.
And since we did this favor, therefore you should buy us coffee. And by us, I mean Destiny. Addie doesn't drink much coffee these days, but
Yet.
She probably will have. So anyway, I'm drinking their Ethiopian Gara.
Oh, it's so
good.
good.
Their single origin. 2 thumbs up. It's one of my favorite just regular drip coffees. I found it like a month and a half ago. I got it for the first time and was like, this is maybe the best cup of coffee I've ever had. So I don't get it like every day, but probably once a week, once every 2 weeks, I'll go get a cup, and it's always just a special little treat. You need those from time to time, just special little treats.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, this is a special treat for me.
Oh.
Look at that segue.
Oh.
Because today, basically what we're going to do is wrap up this whole season. Got a list of questions that we're gonna put you in the hot seat on. And hopefully just try and provide some clarity, because this is the end of our season. And then maybe we'll talk about kind of what to look forward to coming up.
Great.
So let's just start with, I think, the question on everyone's mind.
Great.
When it comes to the pastor process. So actually, let me back up a little bit. So a little bit of a timeline.
Yeah.
Paul Joyner, our previous senior pastor, left July. End of July?
Yes. Very end of July, very beginning of August. It was right there.
So he transitioned out during that time.
Yep.
And so since that time, we as a church, the session made the decision to employ Flourish.
Yep. Right.
Which is a ministry or an organization that helps people find pastors.
Right.
Among other things.
But that's mainly it.
As far as it pertains to us, the goal is they're going to use their connections to the people who run the organization are PCA guys.
That's right.
The organization itself is not.
It's an independent organization, but everybody, pretty much the CEO, Matt, and everybody on their team, so far as I know, they're all PCA teaching elders. So they're right here.
Right. So they understand kind of the culture and I think even more importantly to us have the connections within the denomination to help find the right person.
Right.
So we're now in almost the beginning of December.
Almost the beginning of December.
By the time people hear this, it'll be December.
Yeah.
December 4th at the earliest.
Yeah. Right.
So that's 4 months.
Yeah.
And kind of what's taking so long?
Yeah. Right. Right. So part of what Flourish does is they come in, they see and take their time to figure out kind of who you are as a church, right? Because even though they're PCA guys who come from a PCA background and Zion's a PCA church, even in a denomination like the PCA where, we're a confessional denomination, we hold to, the Westminster Standards and our Book of Church Order, both of which are like exceedingly thorough. Each church has really its own DNA and its own personality. This is something that I'm finding out to be more and more true all the time. No two churches are the same. You could have, Zion and a PCA church maybe at the end of the road on Zion Road. If somebody were to put a church there, not that anybody would, but if they were, Zion and that PCA church, I could guarantee you would have very different personalities. And so because of that, one of the slower parts on this journey on the front end is trying to put to words who the church is and who we're going to be. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of kind of cooperation. Because in the search process, what Flourish is going to have to do is basically do a write-up and have not a marketing type thing, but and the more they call it a profile, it really is kind of not really like a social media thing, but it's like Zion Church is being personified and they're putting together, their Instagram page or Twitter page or, Facebook, whatever your kind of, your social media of choice, LinkedIn to be more, professional. And so you've got the Flourish guys who do all that kind of marketing, who have the kind of profile background, and they've come in, they've done these surveys, they've had to sift through that data, they've had to really study Murray County, because the next guy coming in needs to know what's the culture like. And so why it's taken so long on this front end is there's a massive amount of data to just gather and then put together and put it into something digestible that you can put into a prospective pastor's hands and be like, this is Zion Church. And they don't just see words on a page or, the history of Zion, although those are kind of there. But what they're getting is they're in that like page or two, they're getting the personality that is Zion Church, which has a very unique personality. And so part of the length of it is them sifting through that, but they're also working with the session. So they've sifted through the data and they've sent us things and they're like, okay, on the first read, this is after we've collected all this data, this is kind of the profile that we've seen. Now, granted, we've been there, 2 days and interviewed the session and done some phone calls for, a pretty diverse group of members at the church. We've interviewed the staff. We've looked at the facilities and all of this stuff. So this is our first read session. Does this actually look? Is this the personality of Zion Church? And granted, if you've had a limited amount of time at a 200 and something year old church, you're probably not going to be exactly on it. So they were like, "Here's the first draft. What do you think?" So we took that and we were like, "Okay, this is good." That's not quite, it's not quite us, right? So you've got to go back and rework. And so there's this dialogue between the two of Flourish is seeking to figure out this profile for the church. and the session is speaking into that. And so there's this kind of back and forth of, what's the right tone? What kind of accent does Zion Church have?
But
What
it sounds like in that you're also identifying like what does Zion need.
exactly?
So you're kind of almost killing
Exactly.
two birds with one stone. In that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's part of the process too is, what do you need? And you want something to be, specific enough at identifying the personality and the job description to where that's actually going to vet a lot of people who are like, not me, right? Like anybody who's looking for, a senior pastor role, who is like, the ministry context that I would be best suited for is a inner city urban mission type thing. They're going to look at Zion's profile and be like, "Yep, not me," right? Or any other thing. So it's to draw the right people in, and at the same time, kind of say, "Yeah, that's not me." So both and that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of revision, and so that's where we are with that. Why it's taken so much time. We are, hopefully at the tail end of kind of having that profile together. And once we have that profile together, we'll be able to then, have our congregational meeting to develop and vote on and bring together this pastoral search committee. But you need this kind of church profile, pastor profile type thing in the hands of that committee before you can form the committee, because you're handing them this document to say, this is who the church is, and therefore this is what we're looking for. Find this guy, which may mean, it may mean that you're looking for a guy who maybe you naturally wouldn't go for, right? Like maybe your preference is to have, more of a CEO kind of model, but the thing that that Zion Church needs is somebody that specializes in shepherding. So, so with that, you've got to have both of those things completed, finished, polished, ready to put out in the world, and then ready to hand to that committee before you form your committee. Because in forming the committee, you're basically saying as the committee, this is the guy we're going to go for and we're looking for. So that's why it's taking so long. We want this and are committed to really having taking the front end of this, really taking our time and doing it right. Because if you mess up this part, you end up with the wrong guy. If you rush into it and you say, this is good enough, we're going to put this out here, chances are the description of what we need is actually not what we need, but we got impatient, and so we rushed it and we got the wrong guy. And now we're in a big, we're going to have an issue. So we're trying to take our time. And thankfully, I think from what I've heard, the congregation has been really patient and are, content with where we are and are happy with it. And we pray it stays that way, but we're hoping that, that very shortly, we'll have some momentum there and be in next steps. So,
yeah. So it sounds like just a lot of stuff, kind of a little bit more behind the scenes between
right.
Flourish and the session. And then slowly that'll start rolling out more and more to the congregation.
Right.
So I think one of the next questions that comes to mind then is, some churches, when a senior pastor leaves, they're thrown into this world of chaos, right? Because it was all on the senior pastor's shoulders, and then they leave, and then who's going to pick up the slack and who's going to do this and that and whatever. That didn't happen.
Right.
And it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So why do we need a senior pastor? Why can't you or Jeff just take on the title senior pastor?
I mean, technically, we could. That is an option. I think right now Jeff and I both are, for different reasons going, throwing our hat in the game is maybe not the wisest thing. to do. So at this point, Jeff and I are kind of working arm in arm together, and kind of waiting for whatever else happens. Whoever the church is called, we're having a good time, the two of us. But yeah, I don't think either of us are gonna, put our names in the hat for that position, because it could create all kinds of awkward things. But there's also there is a beauty in that it's not the typical kind of church transition of you're without a senior pastor, and now what? Because that integral role is gone, and so everything's going to fall through the cracks, and things haven't, and things have actually worked pretty well. So at this point, it's we're just seeing what the Lord has. The Lord is blessing this time, and we'll see kind of what the session and what the church wants. But we've seen it. It has happened numerous times before, where in this sort of season, you have a church that's in transition, and they call an interim or something like that to fill that big role, and you get a little ways down the road, and the congregation gets together and says, I think the Lord in His providence has given us what we need, and they're already here, and so then you call that guy, and it works out that way. So anyway, all that to say, there's nothing in the BCO that says that either of us or both of us couldn't. But I think right now we're just kind of waiting to see, what does the Lord have for us? Let's keep our options open for Zion Church. And if it's somebody else, then that's awesome. And if it is Jeff or myself or both, then that's awesome too. But so let's go through the process. Let's see what the Lord has, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. You mentioned an interim pastor there, which I actually don't know the answer to this question. Is that a common practice within the PCA? We both come from very different denominational backgrounds, but that is very common. At least in my tradition, I assume in yours as well, where basically an interim pastor is someone who will step in when a senior pastor leaves to take on some of the role of senior pastor, but usually preaching on Sunday mornings and those kinds of things, but then also helping guide a search team for the next pastor. Typically, the interim pastor is not somebody who plans on staying, but rather somebody who goes kind of from church to church to help shepherd those churches through those times of transition. Right. Is that a common practice in the PCA?
Yeah, it is pretty common, especially with larger churches. So if you have a large church that's in a time of transition, the senior pastor goes. A lot of the times you will call an interim to be there for a specific amount of time, either a larger church or a smaller church. So if you just have one, kind of solo pastor thing, that pastor gets another call, you have to call somebody, whether that's a stated supply or an interim. It's honestly kind of rare that you have a situation where you have numerous teaching elders on staff and the senior leaves, and things are able to work out to where you cut up the responsibilities and it lands on those two teaching elders to kind of split those responsibilities, and things still move forward. That's actually probably more rare than actually bringing in an interim senior pastor. So
we're operating a little bit more as an exception to the rule.
We really kind of
now. Yeah. Is an interim pastor for Zion a potentiality, a possibility, or right now does it feel like no?
Yeah. There is, it's always a possibility. But from the conversations and, both with congregants and with the session, things are moving along really well right now, and the tasks are getting done, and we're moving forward on things, and you know, so that's not really in the conversation. It hasn't been really even from the beginning, just because we were able to delegate those kind of senior roles split between Jeff and myself in the session, and so because of that, yeah, the idea of an interim is it's like, well, what would we really have him do at this point? Because all those tasks have by and large been delegated already. So yeah, that's not really in the conversation, and it honestly, it might just slow us down at this point. So
Gotcha. I think that makes sense. So I want to go back to kind of what we were talking about with Flourish and kind of the goals of that.
yeah,
One of the things you talked about was putting together a profile for kind of what we're looking for in a pastor,
yeah,
and then kind of a profile for Zion as a church. So what are we looking for in a, let's start with pastor.
yeah,
Age,
yeah,
family, no family. Like
right,
what are and maybe we're not even getting that granular, but like
yeah,
my wife wanted to know how much facial hair does, what's the requirement for facial hair?
right.
We have 2 pastors with beards. Do we
Right.
need another? Like that, these are all very important questions.
These are important questions to ask.
But yeah, but like kind of, we're in a very interesting spot where, Paul was here for
Right.
14 years.
Yeah, almost
right?
15.
Almost 15 years. Zion as a church and Columbia and Murray County as a whole are very, very different
Yeah.
than when he started.
Right.
And so kind of what Zion looked for then is very different than what it's looking for now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are we looking for?
Yeah. Well, we'll start with the age question. There is no like required age, and that's not, in our profile, we're not even putting an age down, but we can say this. Just because of the complexity of Zion Church with the various things that we do, the age of the church and the like. One thing you don't want is probably somebody in their 20s or even early 30s stepping into the senior role. And like here, they're just not ready for that. And this is just Keaton's opinion, so take this with a grain of salt. In my mind, the guy that we need in the senior role here is somebody who has a lot of wisdom, and in pastoral ministry, as in most things, what comes with a lot of wisdom is a lot of experience, and therefore a bit older. This does not need to be the church where you're taking your first senior role at Zion. This is the wrong place for that. So again, in my mind, we definitely want somebody that's older. There's no family requirement either, but I think it's pretty typical of if you're you're a PCA pastor in your 50s or 60s, you probably have kids and maybe grandkids by that point, hopefully married, if that's the case. Well, so anyway, yeah. But like, let's say, it's the case where, somebody like John Stott shows up, who's never been married before, is a lifelong bachelor, is a very, very faithful pastor. Sure.
Bring it.
I'd love that guy. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, if John Stott, were still alive and wanted to be, in the PCA, yeah, it'd be awesome to have John Stott kind of work here. So anyway, yeah,
Yep.
No real age requirement, no family requirement, obviously. And this is another thing. Thankfully, the church seems to be moving away from this more. Before, if you weren't married, especially if you weren't married. But kind of if you weren't married and you didn't have kids, there's like at some point in especially 20th century American evangelicalism, that guy kind of they like eyebrows are raised, like what's going on there. Thankfully, praise the Lord, I'm noticing more and more guys in the ministry who are single by choice for a variety of reasons, and the church is welcoming that. I think that's beautiful because honestly, if we didn't welcome that, then the Apostle Paul couldn't have been our pastor, which seems, kind of ridiculous. Yeah, and Jesus couldn't be our pastor, right? Like
yeah.
Yeah, so if you exclude single people from, or single men from the ministry of a teaching elder, then two pretty crucial guys for the Christian faith you've excluded. And I mean, well, and there is this reality too. The head of our church is is a single man who was never married. His name's Jesus. So thankfully there's no stated or unstated rule of married with a family.
So it sounds like the most crucial thing that we're kind of looking for is wisdom, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think, how that reads, and it sounds very like cold and sterile and, not quote unquote spiritual to be like on the resume, like this is what that looks like. But in a sense, we are doing that. Obviously, there will be higher standards and different kinds of things. But when we first are kind of looking for people, it sounds like we're looking for someone who has gained wisdom from experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Who knows how to, be a pastor.
Right.
In some of the ways that we've talked about, I think will be big.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What Zion needs, and from everybody we've talked to, sessions, staff, congregants, high on our priority list is a pastor who pastors, somebody who shepherds well, somebody who's able to equip the saints for the work of ministry, somebody who's able to do that again in the pretty complex ministry web that is Zion Presbyterian Church. Again, part of that is the complexity is is the fact that we have this large school that's a pretty notable size difference between the church and the school, and so to operate and oversee all the ministries of Zion Presbyterian Church, including Zion Christian Academy, you need somebody who just has a lot of wisdom, who's able to come at that as a pastor, but as a pastor who knows how to pastor that thing well, which may mean, taking a, some leadership role, directly or indirectly, with something like a school, in the kind of interesting situation of the relationship between the two. So yeah, that guy's had to have had some laps.
Let's actually talk a little bit more about that, the complexities of Zion Church. Because when I look around, as someone who hasn't been here too long, but I've been here. We've been members 3 years now, a little bit over 3 years, my wife and I. But then obviously I went to the school.
Right.
I graduated in 2017. So like I have a lot of experience around this world.
Right.
And when I look around, like I know I have my list of things that are like, okay, these are the kind of things that I'd want, if someone were coming in, I'd want them to know about. If they were going to be a leader at the church.
Yeah.
What are those things for you? I'm thinking the school, but then also like the demographics of the church and the historicity of the church and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's great. One of the things that yeah, you need to know about the school, and just kind of all the tricky situations you can get into. We're a Presbyterian church that has, as part of our ministry, a school. Um, and with that, especially historically, I've known several PCA churches that have schools, that are ministries of that church, and I've known many who have gotten into major fights because when you do that, uh, at least in certain circumstances, one of the big things becomes, uh, you know, you have to send your, if you're good, maybe even not even stated, but if you want to be members of this church, you've got to send your kid to Christian school because it's the only option. And I'm so thankful, that not only in the congregation level is there a really great representation um, of kids who do go to private schools, and that's plural. We have some who go to Zion school. We have others who go to other private schools in the area, but you also have public school kids and you have homeschool kids. And moreover, on the session itself, there are represented there people who have kids in public schools, kids who have, elders who have kids in private schools, and elders who have homeschool kids or have had, any of those three. And so, I'm so happy that we take that posture that, you know, how you educate your kids is a big choice, and the church wants to help in any way we can, which is why we, take Christian education so seriously, not just at the, Monday through Friday level, but, maybe even most especially at the Sunday afternoon, catechetical level, which is really where we put, the bulk of our chips anyway. Whether you homeschool your kids or send them to private school or send them to public school, where, we take our covenant commitments seriously, and we want your kids to grow up with the Bible and the faith handed down through the ages. So anyway, that's one thing that you just have to be aware of. And anybody who has been a pastor very long knows that that's a thing that you've just got to be, no matter where you go and you're a pastor, but most especially if you go here, you need to know how to navigate those waters and how to not overplay one thing or another. So there's that. Another thing, that I would want somebody to be aware of is, the unique ethos of the church. Um, again, different churches have different personalities. Um, Zion is very unique in the way that it's to use some, kind of maybe more Christian cliches, but it's rooted and relevant, um, in a very unique fashion. It's very rare. Um, you drive up to the church and you look up at this building that was built in the late 1840s, and you look at the graveyard that has, all these, a pretty full graveyard. Some of you can just throw a rock and hit a tombstone from somebody that was born in the 1700s, and if you get lucky, you can hit a Revolutionary War vet. And so that, the rootedness is certainly there, not to mention that we're Presbyterian, which is, especially if you're a consistent Presbyterian, you're already, downloaded as rooted because of our confession of faith. But then you walk in and it's an exceedingly vibrant church. I know there may be, if you come from a charismatic background, you walk into Zion Church and maybe it doesn't seem as vibrant as maybe a charismatic church, but somebody like me, I grew up really kind of more in the Bible church tradition, and so it's not super expressive per se, but but then at seminary, as my kind of Presbyterian convictions began to solidify more. I went to this wonderful small PCA church in Jackson, Mississippi, Pine Haven Presbyterian, if anybody's listening. Love y'all. Just a really, really precious church, but very historic in its worship. It's much more in kind of the Scottish Presbyterian Covenanter and Puritan style liturgy, and they were proud of that. And I am so thankful that I got to be there and do that. They sing a lot of psalms, not exclusively, but they do sing a lot of psalms, and I love that. And it was just a piano or an organ, and the liturgy is a very historic, old school Southern Presbyterian, probably leaning pretty hard on the old French Huguenot tradition. Calvin's Geneva's embedded in there too, very similar. And so because of that, some people would view that as stodgy. I loved it. Thought it was amazing. But so if you come from that and you step in Zion's worship, you're looking and you're like, you can look through the order of worship and go, yeah, this is very similar to Calvin's Geneva. But we're singing songs that were written last year to tunes that were written last year. And, and you've got guys up here who are preaching who at least are trying to address, where I'm at and where culture is, and, world, the world that we live in as a post-Christian, post-everything sort of world. So there is that relevance there that I think is a both and. So it's just this very unique combination. All the while, all of that, and these are more Christian cliches, but I think Zion really encompasses them as being, gospel-centered, scripture-saturated, Christ-centered, God-glorifying, all of those, great John Piper hyphenated words. So, I think that that's who we are. And again, I know some of those are definitely Christian cliches, but, that really is the personality. And another thing about us is it's very organic. There's nothing manufactured about it. It's very personable. And so, we're not a programmatic church. We have programs, but even those, the programs are really just more of an avenue to get together and spend time with one another. So that's really who we are. I would want people to know that. You put in the school, and that's another unique aspect. There is the interesting thing of, if you're at the school, there's a certain flavor there. If you come to the church, there's a pretty different flavor at the church, a pretty different personality. So just knowing that there are those things going on, that, there are different feels in both places. And Zion has that sort of thing. It's rooted, it's relevant, it's gospel-centered, Christ, exalting, scripture-saturated, but also relevant, and all of those things in between.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good. I like the rooted and relevant, as cliche as they might be. But I think that it's important to consider that each church, every church, has its own culture. So when I was in Jackson, Mississippi, I went to Redeemer Presbyterian Church, which if you're familiar with Pine Haven and Redeemer at all, you're probably laughing, because they're very different, vastly different churches, right?
Vastly different churches.
They are representative of the areas where they're in. Jackson is a different city. There's all sorts of things that we could go into there that we won't go into here. Right. But all that to say, the culture of Zion is its own thing.
Absolutely.
And that's okay. And I think pointing to the idea that it's, rooted and relevant, and we're still centered around these ideas. But whenever you get a group of people together, some form of culture is going to form.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Right.
But it's good to identify, I like the word personality. It's good to identify the personality of what is happening.
Right.
And again, like I said earlier, like the culture of Zion 14, 15 years ago is very different than the culture of Zion now.
Right.
The people who are here, we've got so many small children running around.
And we're about to have a bunch more. Right.
So like, like that's totally different from the Zion of my youth, where the people were worried. Like people were worried that Zion was going to go away because of age.
Yeah.
Like people in the church were older, and now that's certainly not the case.
Right.
And so I think, having to walk this line of like, yeah, we're a 200-year-old church, but also our median age is consistently dropping because we just keep having babies.
Right. Yeah. No, young couples show up. And another thing, that's so special to me at this very historic, conservative Presbyterian church. I joke and say that like our life group, if all of us decided to not show up, there would be a pretty big gap. Everybody in our life group is like 32 and under. So here you have, how many of us are there? There's like 8 or 10. You have 8 or 10 people under the age of 32 who are, doing very substantial things in this church, who are, in some capacity in leadership. Cam's up there leading worship. If he's not doing it, Logan is. You're doing all kinds of stuff with, sound and audiovisual stuff.
And you're preaching?
I'm maybe preaching. Katie is heading up the nursery. Destiny and Megan both teach Sunday school. So, Alexi and Whitney are always doing something, somewhere, So like, here's this beautiful thing where you have all these 20 and 30 somethings who are all in, who are serving the church and doing so gladly and doing so in influential positions is a really exciting thing and a strange thing for a church that was started in 1807. That's not common. And I think, that's exciting that not only do we have a lot of young families and a lot of small children, but we have a lot of young families that are in leadership positions, which is just really, really cool. And part of that is part of our personality in the culture of the church is, while historically the church is an older church, there's a definite vibrancy there, that I just love. And I think everybody, is appreciative of it and excited about it. And
I think that's a great word. I think vibrancy is a great word for it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of wraps up a lot of the questions. What should we look forward to? Are y'all sending out monthly updates on the pastor search kind of thing?
Yes. So we committed from the very beginning to sending out monthly timeline updates.
Which I just want to say, that transparency is, number one, not necessarily typical in this process in a lot of churches.
It's not.
And I'm just super grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, that was one thing, when we sat down, when the session sat down and they were really thinking through this process, one of the things that got brought up is, if you want this to go well, transparency is the name of the game. And really just with anything, especially in the church, especially in the West, especially in our day and age, transparency is just, it needs to be a priority in the church. And I'm thankful that as long as I've been at Zion, um, you know, transparency at least uh, aspired to, and going forward, I think it'll have a, you know, a primary spot in who we are, to just be open and honest, because, you know, we don't have anything to hide. But at least communicating where we are consistently is so good. It keeps us a lot out of a lot of really nasty situations, when everybody's on the same page. And, you know, and even in our communication, I think it would be fair, you know, if going forward we get, you know, kind of bogged down with something, to communicating that too, the good and, you know, maybe the not so good. If we get, let's say, you know, we're in the search process a year from now, you know, I think a real communication that we would send out is to say, hey, you know, we're in this process, we're still searching. Um, you know, don't be discouraged by this, but we just haven't had anybody apply, or the right people haven't applied. And so we need to pray, you know, that sort of communication that's honest and transparent, even if it is discouraging, is something that I think we're committed to. I think the church needs. This is a place for, you know, for us to be honest about the situation that we're in. And we thank the Lord that, especially right now, it's as good of a situation as anybody can be. It's beautiful. You know, I've looked at Jeff. You know, we've had several Sundays in the past month and a half, 2 months, where I've looked at Jeff and I've thought, you know, and I've told him, like, you know, that today was just beautiful. It was a beautiful Sunday. And this is, you know, this was Zion. You know, we're in a place of transition, and I feel like even with that, today we still felt like we were at home. You know, and so hopefully we stay in that spot, and the Lord brings us to the next season, whatever that may be, with whoever that may be with. And but along the way, being transparent, and open and honest is something we're really, really committed to. So hopefully, in the next few days, there will be another update of where we are and where we're going from here. And that's our goal really going forward, is as a church, not even in just this process, but in all things, being transparent. And I think we've done a good job at that historically, and hopefully we'll, you know, keep that up going forward, not even just with the pastoral search, but with everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any more questions.
Oh, wow.
This is the end of our season.
Yeah.
So we'll come back in the new year.
Yes. At some point.
Some January-ish.
Yeah, January-ish, February-ish, maybe. Something.
Sometime in there.
Yeah.
We'll be back, and we'll be talking through why we do what we do here
That's
at
right.
Zion on a Sunday.
That's right.
Doing liturgy and worship and
Yeah.
anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so
you sent me the outline, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, you know, we were sitting down this season, being, you know, kind of what it is, talking about the nature of the pastor, you know, and what we're looking for seemed germane. But as it kind of unfolded, one thing I thought about was, you know, one thing there, Zion's worship, what we do on a Sunday morning in particular, and even the term worship in our culture and in the church culture of our day gets used in so many different ways. And so one thing that I wanted to think through, you know, personally, and with all of our multitude of listeners and subscribers, is worship, but specifically Zion's worship. Like, why do we do the things that we do? You know, why do we have calls to worship? And, why do we have corporate confessions of sin? Because that seems weird. Or, why do we have, well, we have numerous different things that we read together, and, they're not quite chants, but we read them in unison. And, if you're not from a particular kind of church background, that seems culty. So, why does that look like that? Again, what does it actually mean why do we have weekly communion? And what does it even mean? And y'all use words there like fellowshipping in the throne room with Jesus. What does that mean? And what is a benediction? Kind of thing. These are all different things that, like, if you've grown up in kind of the Presbyterian tradition, my guess is you probably take it for granted and are just like, yeah, that's just what we do. Or maybe you don't come from a Presbyterian tradition, and so you look at our Sunday worship and you go, no, I didn't grow up with that, and I don't know what I think about that. So just working through some of that, engaging some of the, kind of cultural things right now in regards to worship, what it is, what it isn't, what is it supposed to do, and the like. So yeah, I think we're calling it, worship and witness.
Love it.
And so that's, season, I guess, 4, yeah, 4-ish. Yeah, season 4 on For the Church is all about worship and witness, and we're hoping, we'll look through the theology of worship, why we do what we do, what it's there to do, and hopefully, I don't want to make any promises, but we're hoping to have maybe some special guests on, maybe. So anyway, yeah, I don't want to overpromise here. So
we've talked about a lot of things, but I don't think we've talked to any of the special guests yet.
We have not talked to special guests yet.
We should do that before we promise anything.
Yes, potentially special guests on here. And so, yeah, we'll think through that, and, yeah, what does it look like it does here, and what are maybe some different traditions of how a Sunday worship looks, and why Presbyterians in Nigeria worship differently than we do.
Great.
So those are questions we're going to think through and ask and address, and hopefully, you can listen to that, and then you show up on Sunday and go, oh, I know why this is here, and this is really thoughtful, and it helps me worship Jesus all the more, because now I know why it's here. So
that's great. Thank you for your work on this, and thank you for your faithfulness as pastor.
Thank you for the questions and the season.